But this afternoon, our speaker will be Chuck Randolph, and he's a 1964 graduate of Caldwell High School. Then he went to that other school in Canyon County. I think it was NNC then, not NNU. Finished in 1968 and joined the Caldwell School District in 1969. He graduated in social studies and education from NNC, and so therefore obviously taught in the school district in Caldwell. Twice he was chosen as the Teacher of the Year, and was chosen 3 times to be the speaker at the senior class graduation. He was also chosen as a Krista McAuliffe scholar, and he may be able to explain exactly what that means. Then moved to the administration in 1989, and worked in the curriculum area, and then was the assistant supervisor until retirement in 2005. He's done a lot of different volunteer work throughout after that and during that time, and has been honored as the Lifetime Achievement Award from the City of Caldwell, and Caldwell High School awarded him a Distinguished Citizen Award or graduate in 2014. The title of his talk is going to be Caldwell Trivia in 4 parts. Three parts? Four parts, okay. All right, so I'm sure he can fill in more of the details about his past.
Thank you for the introduction, and I've warned several of you that have said you came today to hear me or came with high expectations to lower your expectations, please. I looked out this morning and had Channel 6 on, and they said that there were possibility of snow flurries, but it would all be melted off by noon. That's Channel 6, that's false news. It was mentioned in the intro that I'm a graduate of Northwest Nazarene College. I've never quite made the jump to call it a university, but they do, but I am only because the C of I would not let me in. I had achieved a class standing of 125 out of 175 at Caldwell High School in a class that wasn't very smart anyway. And C of I took a look at that, and I got a letter back saying, we suggest you try another school for a couple of years and then reapply when you're ready to enter upper division work. Luckily, NNC was weighted toward ACTs. So I got a letter back saying you're admitted, and then in handwritten, the outgoing registrar wrote, my mother framed it, still around the house somewhere, and it said, we're offering you an honor scholarship. I knew they figured I couldn't keep a 3.7 to keep the thing up, so they were safe. And he said, apparently, based on your ACTs, you apparently have the ability, but you seldom choose to use it. And that was true of high school, but NNC was a good fit for me. The writer and historian David McCulloch, when asked about why history, why do we need it, especially why microhistory, a business, a college, a community, a region of the country, why isn't it just today and the future is what's important? He thought for a minute and answered back that he thought it was tremendously rude, egotistical, and arrogant not to know about the community you lived in, not to know about what went before. And I thought, you know, that's pretty good, but how do you know about Caldwell? And I was asked about that by Jerry a little bit ago of where do you go for information, and it's spread all over, but let me tell you my trip into it. And it comes back to the College of Idaho, and to Louis and Barbara Atterbury's son and daughter-in-law, the doctors Atterbury. They put together a walking tour of Caldwell back in 1977. And it was at a time when going through the literature of social studies was the community as a classroom. A few years later, one of your alums, I think from 58 or 9, Marguerite Stewart, who was an outstanding English teacher at Caldwell High School. I got a chance to team teach for a number of years with her on a variety of grants. School district wouldn't fund us, but the Idaho Humanities Council, Idaho Commission on the Arts, Wittenberger Foundation, Association of University Women, a whole group put together and gave either money or in kind to help us. And we were able to bring Brian and Jennifer Atterbury to Caldwell High. And they began the idea of field trips around and taught us really how to use the community. Let me give you one quick example. The log cabins down in Caldwell Park. It's one thing to talk about the Civil War and have a timeline, and you have 1860 and you have Appomattox Courthouse in 1865 and you have this and that and the other. But it's quite another when you can take a group of kids down and stand them in front of the Johnson or McKenzie cabins and say, these were built in the last year of the Civil War. Now let's figure out why in the world they're in Caldwell, why a bunch of border state people showed up here, or like my relatives, they were on the losing side of the Civil War. They decided the better part of valor was to get out, and Idaho looked like a good place. So they started on the Palouse and migrated south from there. But it's so much easier to talk to students about an abstract concept of a war that's way beyond their ability to comprehend and to put it in front of something concrete. And we were able to do that all over the community, including saying, you know, you look at the College of Idaho, it started exactly 1 year after Idaho statehood did. One of the, and I've cleared this with one but not the other of the co-presidents. Sorry, Jim, I didn't see when you came in, but this is no surprise. But I'm here as partly as an advocate for as the financial fortunes of the college turn around. One of the early things that needs to be restored is the College of Idaho archive. It became, under Jan Boll's leadership, just an invaluable resource to Caldwell. Again, let me give you a couple of quick examples before I move on to the second, third, and fourth part of this, this whole thing. Jan was in a position where people would say, okay, they were doing some work on, well, one couple. They were doing work on female photographers in the United States, 2 college professors. They were on grants, on sabbatical. And where do you go? Well, they heard about a name. They called the college switchboard referred them to Jan, and before you knew it, they were in town. And we began to uncover things that we had never known about some of the classic photos of the community. One that I'll begin it over here and pass it around. It's kind of clipped together. This is a Caldwell High yearbook. It's called the Powwow. C of I wasn't particularly politically correct in those days, but this is from 1913, and one of the businesses advertising is the Turner Horse Market. And down in the corner, I had seen it for years, was Snodgrass Photographers. And I had no idea who they were, except it was an early photography group around here. And sure enough, it was the Snodgrass sisters who had come to Caldwell, opened a photo studio, and taken tremendous early photos of the community at a time when photography was a man's domain. And that's why cameras were so heavy. It took a pack mule to move them around so women wouldn't be tempted to get into the business. And also there was a rumor that because of women's biology and the chemicals for developing photos, that they would cause all kinds of trouble for themselves and the unborn and the whole bit. So if you want to scare somebody out of an occupation, that's the way you do it. And you think of the early photographers of the country, they were the Matthew Brady's, the Ansel Adams, the all men's names, but there was a tremendous number of women who took the risk. Snodgrass sisters did. I even delivered newspapers to one of them down on Lower Cleveland years ago and had no idea who she was. When this comes around to your table, there's also a blue tab, and I think it's one of the greatest senior pictures that I've seen. This is Ethel Bales Wittenberger. If you know the Wittenberger Foundation, its relationship to the college, feel free to turn forward to that as well. I'll start this with you, Rick, and if you'll just kind of work that around. Another thing that the archive brought to the college was a person who was writing a book on women in the press in World War II. And they were female reporters who were embedded with combat troops, and they were precious few. But she knew that the first one to be fully accredited came from a place called Caldwell, Idaho. So again to the college, again to Jan, and in the book that was a result of it, and the book's titled The Women War Correspondents, the U.S. Military and the Press. One of these was Martha Gellhorn, who was one of Ernest Hemingway's multiple wives along the way. But she writes this, and this is the kind of publicity, the kind of acknowledgement that a liberal arts academic institution just can't buy. This isn't advertising, this is the real thing. And she's saying, I'm thankful for the many people who gave me advice and helped me find materials, offered me encouragement along the way. One who fits that category is Jan Bowles, archivist of the Robert E. Smiley Archives at the College of Idaho. The fact that an unprocessed collection of Inez Calloway Robb's papers existed, along with the fact that I could just as easily have overlooked them entirely without Bowles' help, was a great gift. And that's the kind of thing that the College Archive has, are those papers that are unprocessed that you don't go online and find reference to. And it goes on, including a real treasure that was captured thanks to $1,000 purchase by Bill Crookham. Some of you have seen it in the archive. It was the leather-bound volume of court records, about like so, and that thick. The county, in its wisdom, decided to throw them out. Word got out that there was a dumpster full of court records, so some went down, went through them, and in the one that was donated to the archive is the arraignment on January 1, 1906, of Harry Orchard for the assassination of Governor Smiley. Beautifully handwritten page of it. Schoenenberg, I'm sorry, Governor Schoenenberg, and it would have been totally lost without. So, co-presidents, the pressure's on. Archive, I'll be counting. Thank you. One of the organizations that's a hidden treasure of Caldwell is the CFEO, the Caldwell Foundation for Educational Opportunity. President Doug talked about that just a little bit. On your table, there's a handout like this, and you could update the invested assets thanks to the estate of Mary Crookham, Caldwell High class of 1978. We are now just under $1.5 million in the endowment. And that money's invested. The interest and dividends go out every year for scholarships. This year there were 48 when this was printed. That's because 2 kids got a false start in college, decided not to go where they went, came back, started in second semester, so it's now 50, and 51,000 in scholarships went out this time. You'll notice the boards up here on the far one, it's several of them, I guess. They're kind of mixed together. You'll see the College of Idaho shirt color group. It was sort of a silent advertising they were carrying on the night of the awards, and they all dressed in C of I colors, and they are here, and they are the top of their class. No question about it. For the academic scholarships, you'll see them marked, and there are some others as well. In the center portion of this, the College of Idaho matches these up to $2,000. So our largest ones around 2,800, then amount to 4,800, 4,500 if they come to the college. It's a tremendous partnership. It's been in place for a long time, and we are really happy with it. You'll notice a very handsome young man up here in one of the pictures, happens to be a grandson of Helen and Gary Strine up at the front table. So the Strines will undoubtedly be making a donation as soon as this is over. I've got no shame about asking for money. Practicing to be college president. You just ask for you gotta have it, so you ask. The foundation has anyway been in place now for over a quarter century, and we're really proud of the way that it's working. 2 of our board members you'll see listed are faculty members of the college, Dr. Steve Mon and Arnold Hernandez from his office. He's a very new member. Dr. Mon has been on for a good long while. There's several of them that are my former students, including Mon. If I'd known he was going to grow up to go to Harvard, I would have given him a better grade in high school government, but you know how it goes. I'm going to just allude to and then come back after this if anyone is interested. There are 2 posters down here, and there are some sheets on your tables that have to do with the Van Slyke Outdoor Museum. This is another project that I'm part of in Caldwell. This is the outdoor display in the Caldwell Park, and this is the plan for it. The first 2 phases, 3 phases are done. The old horseshoe pits that used to be next to the display are gone, and the old chain link fence that made it look like a wannabe prison are gone. We have a really nice wrought iron fence around the place. We were able to pay for it with grant money. It's not a wall, it's definitely a fence. And we have a patio poured toward the back of it with a cover. There will be bleachers in there that'll hold about 70 people. And the hope is that we can get back to field trips for students, have a place to give them orientation, and then to walk them around. The next phase that will occur, you'll be seeing down there, will be paths that will be paved during 4th of July. That thing is open, and that's about the only time it is, unless you go with special arrangement with the city or with me. And we have a number of people in the 4th that were in wheelchairs, using walkers, and it was very difficult going in that gravel. So that'll be the next thing through, then the material grouped. This is the Van Slyke Museum. Van Slyke family certainly have a lot to do with the College of Idaho. There's a Van Slyke family scholarship that comes through the C of I Foundation. And Eloise Van Slyke is one of the pushers behind this. She'll be doing some of her mosaic work on the wall that shows around. Once you get inside, it'll be an interpretive panel wall, and you'll go beyond then the cabins, get into the ag equipment, and that will be grouped by Lake Lowell, by seed, by harvest, by water. We have several categories. You'll see them on those papers on your table. If those papers or that project is of interest to you, please feel free to take those with you. If not, leave them there and I'll pick them up later, but I'd really like to encourage you to be part of the resurrection of that project down there. Those cabins have been there a long time, and so many people will come through and say, I've never found it open. I've never been in here, never been near it, never been whatever. Well, we can make that happen. And I've talked to Barry about maybe this group on a field trip where we motor by some of these things like that. And we'll see what happens in the future if I'm ever invited back after this. Let me tell you about one of your alums, Madeline Buckendorf. I think was one of your majors, Dr. Atterbury, with Madeline. She's coined the term history emergency. And we have those occasionally. And they often come with indigestion. And I had it not too long ago, the local paper, whatever its name is now, not the Tribune, not the News Tribune, not the Press Tribune, but it's gone to Boise. That paper did a deal about maybe in mid-January, we're there now, that the new owners of the Pennywise drug would open it and people could come back for a nostalgic goodbye before the building is demolished for the Terry Riley clinic on the first floor and housing on the top 3 floors. And I mulled it over, and finally a friend said, just call the reporter. So I did, got a very nice reporter new to the area. And I said, well, you know, I'm not too sure why anybody would be real nostalgic about Pennywise. Been there a long time, all right. And some of the products on the shelves had the coloring of yellow that were there when I graduated from Caldwell High School. And, you know, it did its job. But a more interesting part of it would be that was Albertson's store number 103, his third one after he graduated from Caldwell High School in 1925, came to the College of Idaho. You know, the folklore of proposing to Catherine Albertson under the hat. 14 years after he graduates from high school, opens his first supermarket on State Street in Boise, then 102 in Nampa, 103 in Caldwell. And that was a grand building of the era. That would be maybe more interesting. Plus, you might say that that's where the Crookham Seed Company started out, and the thing that's looks out of place back by the alley, but it's a loading dock and a cement block building, Pennywise on it. You know what I'm talking about? Thing has so much cement in it, nobody can figure out how to tear it down. But that was a Crookham Seed, either cleaner, drier, whatever sort of the day. That might be a more interesting part of the story than this. And so she assured me that if her editor saw any future in that particular project, that she would be back in touch. I've been standing by my phone for some time. Have basically heard nothing. Well, one of the most asked questions I get, and that's where the main part of this comes in, so I'm going to abbreviate a portion of this, but it's, okay, what happened to Caldwell? Because we started out in 1883, called the Magic City. It went from 0 buildings to 125, 0 permanent population to 500 between September and December of 1883. Had a school opened in 1884. even though the Caldwell School District doesn't want it to be. They're advertising it 1889 because they want to do some kind of celebration this year and want an even number. So I guess it doesn't matter, but if I were there, I would want to go back to the first school instead of saying, and I've said to them, you know, that's fine if you want 1889, but you have to realize that Lincoln School, first Lincoln, was built in 1887, where the Sears building is, which is now Avalon Antiques and on down the line. And so we grew and we grew and we grew, and then what happened? And the answer is, I think several things came together at once, and one of them is the interstate came to Caldwell in the early 1960s. City fathers wanted it to divide the community rather than just touch the edge like it did Nampa and Boise and Mountain Home and most other communities, because they felt like everybody would come to Caldwell. And what they found out was an interstate has more than 2 lanes. It can go that way as well. So people began shopping out of here. And then, and we're getting back into it now downtown with this really successful business and at Flying M and the ice rink and theater and so on. It's all great, but where in the heck do you park unless you're going to park on the railroad track and hike? You're not going to get real near it, and it's going to take some getting used to for us. And that happened in the 60s. And you remember, if you're around here then, what the answer was? You put in more parking meters and raise the fine. And somehow that's going to create more parking spaces. The answer was that a part of George Karcher's old farm came up for sale, and Dom Development went out and paved acres of free parking. And why anybody would ever go to a mall, I do not understand and never will, but people did. And downtown Caldwell began to pay the price. And just listen to this, and I'll just read a couple of these quickly before I ask for technical help up here. But just think about this for however long you've been in Caldwell. I just made these, this list. It's very, very partial, but it's ones I remember. We then lost the ID store, which was also known as the Golden Rule. We lost Penny's, we lost Muir's department store, we lost Van England's, we lost Chuck Banks, became Navzinger's men's store. We lost Moses Alexander's men's shop. Downtown, we lost Rosanna's dress shop. We lost Sandy's, we lost Irene's, all women's shops. We lost Adrian Flowers' men's store. We lost Earl's. How could Earl's go away? That sign had been on Blaine forever in front of Abracadabra Antiques now. We lost Sears, we lost Garber's Shoe Store, we lost Warren's Shoe Store. We did get Bella Blue Dress Shop at Kimball and Maine, just opened, but I'm not into cross-dressing, so that store has very little to do with me, but I can get new socks at Bi-Mart now, which is a step up. We lost Ladies Cafe, we lost Pollard's Cafe. How could Pollard's go away? McCluskey's Cafe. You remember the High Pop, those of you that are real Caldwell natives? That was on 12th between Dearborn and Everett. It was a little tiny building still there that could hold more kids than any other building in town. It was a bulging phone booth. The Jefferson Junior High and Caldwell High School had no food service. So if you wanted to eat lunch, you had to go to Lincoln School. If you were a self-respecting junior high or high school kid, you'd never go down to Keith's old school for lunch. I can still smell that lunchroom after about 800 kids had gone through it. We lost 24 Flavors. We lost the Saratoga restaurant and later Brother Bob's. the El Adobe out on Plymouth. We lost the golden pheasant, for heaven's sakes. How do you lose that? The reed and bell, the quick curb. Dragging the curb was the way to do it. That was a page out of American Graffiti. I left more recap tires out there over my high school years than you can imagine, and boy, did I make up stories for why I had bald tires with my folks. Dairy Queen, we kept Jim in and out from 1962 somehow. We lost the cafe at the bus depot at King's. Remember the lunch counter at King's back with the parakeets? It was a wonderful combination. We lost Williamson Furniture, Peckham Furniture, Ogsted's Furniture, Pfeiffer's Furniture, Case Furniture and Undertaking. Home Sleep Home water beds, remember those things? Or did you ever have a flood from one of them? Terry's Electric became TC, moved his work out to Blackers, and we lost that. And then I'll end up with, well, the grocery stores go on that we lost, but these are the ones closest to my heart. We lost Leo J. Mason Motors, that was a Buick GMC dealer, Jason Smith Oldsmobile, Garber Motor, Ford, Curtin Howell, Dodge Plymouth, Lodge Motor, Chrysler, Edmarks, Lincoln Mercury, Christensen, he sold everything. Nash, Metropolitan, Oscar Payne, for heaven's sakes, where McDonald's is now. Had Packards out there. Godfrey's Jumbo's used car lot. Remember the office was on stilts out on the strip. That was a tax protest. I think he won. The Studebaker Garage. We lost a huge number of things and then are beginning to get them back in downtown Caldwell now. But the history emergency part of that is when the buildings are taken down or when people come in and act like Caldwell is a blank slate. It's never had anything. It's never had a department store, never had a men's store or women's store, never had a shoe store, and their memory just absolutely does not go back that far. That to me is a little bit offensive, and that's part of the project today. So if I can have, I have, after I was sort of escorted to the door of the Caldwell School District in a purge in 2005, I decided I was going to live off the grid and be technologically totally illiterate. It was only in the last 8 years that I even ended up with a cell phone, only because a friend bought one and insisted I use it. So the pictures coming up are 8mm, so you know about the quality they're going to be. They were taken at the corner of 21st and Cleveland. College campuses in the background. You'll see especially Voorhees, Sterry. It'll scan down to the hat. And these are from May of 1953. In that year, Caldwell celebrated its 70th anniversary. And there's no sound with this, obviously, from these. And they were, as the 5 mile, the parade was 5 miles in its moving. And we've got it set, we think, at 50% of speed. But look for the various businesses, many of them that I've mentioned. Almost always somebody finds themselves in a float or a band or whatever in this thing, or somebody they know. If you knew Opal and Archie Gully, or know Opal, her mother is on a float in here, Mary Ford Gardner, with Nikki Elna sewing machines. Riding 5 miles on a flatbed trailer, working a sewing machine was and without falling off, was amazing. good views of the campus when the canopy of trees over Cleveland existed along the campus and on down toward town. You still see some of the houses identifiable in the background. And if you like classic cars, you could be salivating about this. The guy on this float is Ed Shaw. He lives in Washington State now. Said it was a great day because he got to hold hands with his girlfriend for 5 miles. Idaho department store, go